All right, good morning, everyone, to the home run course. We have a few people who are away right now, but I presume they'll watch the replay. And we're extremely fortunate today to have two wonderful guests on the call with us. Brad Cartier, wave hi, Brad. And of course, Aaron Markel. And these are wonderful people, and they're spending the next 2 hours with us, and they're going to help us understand a great deal more about the development business. Just before, though, we get going, I'm going to share my screen with you. You have to put up with about 10 or 15 minutes of me and before we get to Brad and Aaron. Dan, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen okay? All right. So this is lecture 3, and as I mentioned, we have two special guests with us, Brad Cartier and Aaron Markel, and they're going to be talking about how they're building sixplexes, which I call sixplex 10plexes, which is a little bit of a misnomer, I guess, but that's what it actually is. You'll see how they're doing it, and what a remarkable job they're doing. They're taking a lot of the animation strategies that I've been working on, and they're taking them and stretching them even further. And it often happens that the people I coach, especially people like Brad and Aaron, who are super smart and smarter than their professor, take whatever I know and do more and do better. And then we're gonna, I asked them if they would do a second case study, and they agreed, which I'm really glad they did. They've developed, I think it's the first campground to be developed in Ontario in a long time. Brad, do you know how many years it's been?
The president of the Ontario Association said the first campground in the last 10 years.
So this is, Ontario is a pretty big place. You know, it's not as big as California. I mean, physically it's big, but you know, there's about 50 million people living in Ontario, and I think California's 35 million or something like that. But so it's big. And Brad and Aaron had the guts to do a glamping facility and the first camping facility in a decade, and that's called Hammond Hill, and we're going to hear about that. Here are Brad and Aaron, on site at Hammond Hill. I don't know if I took that picture or somebody else did. I guess somebody else did. This was actually, I think, in Ottawa Business Journal. That's a local newspaper. Actually, I think Brad, I started it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it was called Ottawa Business News when I started it, and I started it because I got fed up with the local paper, and then I sold it, and it's now been renamed Ottawa Business Journal. Been very successful, and it really, the headline kind of sums up. They built a public campsite when nobody else could or would, and it's incredible that they what they have achieved at a relatively young age. This is a little bit of Brad's CV. He's been a chief marketing officer for many property technology companies. So he's not just a real estate developer. He knows a lot about prop tech. He's currently chief marketing officer at Hostfully. Where they're based in the States, but where are they based out of, Brad?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. And he's an expert in medium-term rentals and short-term rentals, Airbnb and vacation rental by owner, Verbo. And he's involved in so many things. I don't know how he does it. He also has a wife and 4 kids, and he's involved with Stessa, Roofstock, Properly, and Fundmore. He's developed 30 units to date, and there's another 70 in the pipeline. That's quite a lot to take care of. I mentioned Hammond Hill, a 62-acre eco glamping resort. He's been a spy at CSIS for 10 years, and now he's focused on real estate full time. And one of the things I've asked all of you to do, and I'd ask you again if you haven't done so, is Brad and his co-founder are publishing a weekly free newsletter called briefcase.email. And if you go to briefcase.email, you can subscribe. It's a real estate data-driven newsletter. A lot of the stuff that I teach is not as data-driven. It's more observation and experience. But Brad is a data guy, and I really want you guys to subscribe. I mean, you can unsubscribe at any time, and it's free. And it's not daily, which I support. I don't want to get too many daily newsletters. I get one from Briefcase every week, and I read it. And then Aaron is an incredible guy. You know, he did go to university, but he didn't last very long there because he wanted to explore his entrepreneurial side. And I'm not surprised to hear that. You know, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook ever finished his degree at Harvard. And many of these entrepreneurs, you know, they kind of get fed up with formal education. At some point, they do leave, and they want to exercise their own creativity. He started off as a licensed flooring contractor, and then he started this company called AIM Project Management. It's a general contracting company. And, you know, he's working with Brad on a lot of projects, and he's done something called the Broken Stick Brewery. I think the Broken Stick might refer to a pool cue, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Is that correct, Aaron?
Well, it was a hockey stick in our original location, and since we relocated to the golf course, it's now a golf club.
All right. Okay. So Broken Stick. We mentioned Hammond Hill as well. And I'm going to ask Brad and Aaron questions about small living company, which I think might be the biggest of these businesses at some point. And he does a number of charity things for Habitat for Humanity, Ronald McDonald House. And more recently, he's become a wedding officiant. And so if you want to get married, or your friends want to get married, you could go to Hammond Hill, and Aaron will officiate at a wedding. He's licensed and dangerous now. All right, what is it? 007, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about the two fellows. You'll get to know them a lot better today. But I wanted to start with a little bit of a lecture that I thought would help everybody in this course, but also would help you know, Brad and Aaron too, to some extent. And I wanted to talk about something that Aaron has really brought to the table over the last few years, and that is his ability to build things on a budget and on time. That is a killer in the real estate development business. We know how long it takes to get a site plan today, how costly it is to work through the rezoning process or official plan amendment process. But once you finally get through all of that, you still have to build the thing, whatever it is you're building. And I wanted to go back in time. This goes back, you know, more than 30 years. And I wanted to talk about Cyril Leeder. You can see Cyril Leeder. He is, if you could see my cursor moving, he is pictured here on the right, and a younger Cyril is on the left, together with Randy Sexton and a younger Bruce Firestone. No laughing about how old I am now and how young I was there. But Randy and Cyril were the two key guys, along with myself, in the founding of the Auto Centers and the eventual construction of the Canadian Tire Center. But I wanted to talk about the actual day when I first interviewed Cyril. He worked with me for 35 years. So that's quite a long time. And I interviewed two people to become chief operating officer of what was then a small company called Terrace Investments Limited. And Cyril showed up with a suit, but not a very good one, and shoes, but not polished. And he was a very quiet guy. And you know, I was interviewing two candidates. The other had nice suit, and he was a good talker, and he was very flashy. Cyril was a chartered accountant. He wanted to leave public accounting and go do something with his life that wasn't just auditing other people's books. And my company, our company, was very small. The first year revenues, total revenues, $350,000, so really tiny. But I decided to hire Cyril, even though he was quiet and not flashy. And because I felt that, you know, he had substance and he had potential for growth. And of course, that turned out to be true. Between Cyril and myself, with help from many other people, we built that company from real estate company from $350,000 in revenues in year one to just over 120 million 9 years later. So that was reasonable growth. But what I wanted to show you is how important cost control is. And this is one of the early projects of Terrace Investments that Cyril and I did together. It's called Robertson Mews. It has townhouses, it has single family homes, it has some condos, both 1 bedroom and 3 bedroom, and it has a retirement residence as well. I think you can sort of see it over here in this diagram. Brad, can you see my cursor moving around when I do this?
Yep.
Okay, so it was kind of it was mixed use, but there was no commercial, but there were, you know, different types of housing, right, in this particular property, and that's something I really believe in. And this is just an aerial photograph that I actually put together this morning. My wife double booked me, by the way, everybody. I had to go for my annual checkup this morning. So I rushed out to my doctor's office and rushed back. I'm glad to tell you that my blood pressure is the blood pressure of a 45-year-old. So I should last at least until the end of this lecture. Thanks for the thumbs up there. Anyway, I got a good report, I'm happy to say. So this is called Robertson Mews. So, you know, I like to name things. When you name things, you give it value. I love naming things. And this is Robertson Road, so I call this Robertson Mews. And I like to name things where the names are easy to spell. Pretty much everybody can spell Robertson, right? I mean, in Ottawa, we have many wonderful names like Gundawara Crescent, which is a major industrial road in Ottawa, but people struggle, you know, with spelling Gundawara. It's a wonderful Indian name, but it's not easy to spell. So I go with something easy to spell, Robertson Mews. And this, just to give you an idea, so here is, watch my cursor, here is the outline of this property that I purchased. It's on a major road called Robertson Road. There is a plaza here, and everybody said, Bruce, you're crazy to build residential next to you know, busy street and next to a commercial space. But this was the 1980s, and even then I believed in you know, being able to walk to a store. You know, I lived in Australia for many years, and I can tell you the Australians do not build a subdivision without a pub. They've got to have a pub. Without a you know, a dry cleaner, without a general store, without a doctor's office. But here in Ottawa, where I live, we're still building subdivisions in places like Barrhaven with 3,500 houses in a row, without a single job, without a single shop, where every trip, even the trip to the schools, every trip is a car trip. I think that is a terrible idea. So I didn't want to do that. So here, over here on the screen, these are the first, this was first phase. These are the one-bedroom condos that we built. And then you'll notice there was an existing row of single-family homes here. Everybody can see that on the screen. These are single-family homes that were existing. And just to bring our neighbors on side so they wouldn't, you know, necessarily freak out because there's more development in the neighborhood, I said I would mirror that with a whole row of singles here. The singles weren't very profitable for us back then, but at least they provided a buffer for the existing, you know, singles. They didn't really want 3 or 4 story buildings right next to them looking into their backyard. So I said, no problem. I'm going to put a row of singles as part of this. So those are singles over here. And then you get to a 3-story, 3-bedroom condos here overlooking what is a public nature. This is the Trans-Canada Trail, which is an important part of being out in nature. And one of the things that I've stressed to every developer that I've worked with for many years, including myself, is that if you're building, you know, a few hundred units, keep some for your portfolio. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then somewhere in here, I guess up here is the retirement residence called Robertson House. Robertson Mews, Robertson House seemed to make sense. And I just wanted to, just for fun, I wanted to show you something over here. There's about 1.5 acres of land here that was left over when this overpass for the rail line, which was eventually turned into the Trans-Canada Trail, when it was built. So there was 1.5 acres of land owned by the province of Ontario. And I wanted to get a hold of that because, you know, it goes with the rest of the property. And so I went down to see the land people about buying this. You know, I went to see the provincial officials, and I offered them $25,000 for 1.5 acres of land, which even back then was probably worth 10 times that. And the reason I offered them such a low number was this piece of land was completely landlocked. You can't sell it to the road. I mean, that's owned by the city of Ottawa. You can't sell it to Trans-Canada Trail. You can't sell it to the nature reserve here, which is owned by the National Capital Commission. The only person who had land right next to it was me. Who are they going to sell it to? And it was completely landlocked. And so I put them in a box, and it took me about 18 months of negotiation. Nothing with government is fast, at least not in my experience. But eventually they agreed to sell it to me for $25,000. Then I said to Cyril, I think I paid too much. And Cyril said, Bruce, are you crazy? Don't go back. I said, I'm going to go back and complain about something and ask for a price abatement. So I went back and I offered them $18,000. And eventually they agreed. And then, we developed that. It was probably worth 200 or 300, well, at least 250 and probably $300,000 to us. So anyway, that was a story. Now, actually, I'm going to go back. One other thing, I mentioned was whether you're a small developer, mid-scale developer, or large-scale developer. Well, yes, you're going to build and sell some stuff. The sales process is part of your cash engine. But keeping some of your, if you're building 300 homes a year or 30 homes a year, you want to keep some of them, right? And create a portfolio that gives you committed monthly recurring revenues. That's kind of the holy grail of business. And so I even back in the 80s, I knew that. And so I kept a number of them. I think I kept 12 of these 1-bedroom condos, and I turned it into PETA. PETA stands for People Eating Tasty Animals. No, it doesn't. No, it stands for Presidential Executive Travel Apartments. And if there's one thing I could whisper in my ear, if I could go back to being 39, which would be a good thing, as long as I could retain all my memories, if I could whisper one thing into a 39-year-old Prof Bruce ear, what would it be? And it would have been, and you've heard me say this before, some of you, to put Presidential Executive Travel Apartments in my wife's name. And that's my wife here. Her name is Dawn, as you know. Why would I have done that? Because as you know, I think all of you know, when the Sens went bankrupt, that was the end of me too. I had to restart my career at age 54. I should have put it in my wife's name. I'm a high profile entrepreneur. There's a risk with that. And it would have made a lot of sense if Dawn had owned it instead of me. Anyway, this was Presidential Executive Travel Apartments. And again, I apologize because some of you have seen this before. This was a property developed by Robert Berger and his brother David Berger out of Montreal. It is in Ottawa. It's called Holland Cross. And I called, I can't remember whether I talked to Bobby or I talked to his brother, David, but I talked to one of the brothers and I said, what are you doing with the ground floor condos and how are condo sales going? They said, great, everything's great. That's all developers ever tell you. If you ask an entrepreneur how he's doing, everything is great. I mean, there's only one word answer for it. But in actual fact, they hadn't sold a single one of these. And I really liked these 1-bedroom condos on the ground floor because they each had their own ingress and egress. And you've heard me say in this course before, whether it's a single family home, a duplex, a triplex, a large apartment building, every time you give an apartment its own doorway to the outside, you've added value. And it's true in this building too. But Bobby and his brother David didn't know that. I did, but they did not know it. They hadn't sold a single condo. And people don't really, individual buyers don't really like the idea of ground floor condos. They like the idea of being, in the penthouse or being on the 10th floor, away from the noise of the street or whatever. So I bought all 16 of his ground floor condos. I furnished them and I created something called Presidential Executive Travel Apartments. I bought those 16 condos from Bobby and brother. I love the fact they had their own ingress and egress. And I could put, back in the day, I just put lockboxes on them and somebody could visit short-term rental, kind of Airbnb before there was Airbnb. Could come at 2 o'clock in the morning, put in the, just a mechanical lockbox and let themselves in. It was very high tech back then. We had fax machines in there. There was no email, but your fax machines are still used in Japan, and because Japanese characters are very hard to type, and so they still fax each other. And we furnished them, and it had cable TV. It seemed pretty exotic. They were all ready to go, and we had a cleaning service, which was for an extra charge. And apartments back then were renting for about $1,200 a month, but we were getting with PETA $3,000 a month. That's quite a significant animation. And when we became the owners of the Ottawa Senators expansion franchise, we used them ourselves a player would come in, rather than putting him into a hotel downtown with all the bad influences, maybe some ladies of the night and maybe some drugs and some other things that you could find in a downtown location. They were in kind of a suburban location in one of our travel apartments, a little bit safer in some ways. You've got 19, 20-year-old men with a few $1 million to spend. That's a recipe for concern. What I liked about presidential executive travel apartments is it wasn't too management intensive, because it really, Brad and Aaron, it was more of a medium-term rental as opposed to like Airbnb, which can be, 2 or 3 days. We had high quality tenants, so we didn't have a lot of damage to our units. We had, I think, zero problems with collections. We had very little competition back then. And we developed, good relationships with government and private firms and technology firms who were always bringing in, executives and teams to work in Ottawa. And so we ended up with 28 units, I think 16 at Holland Cross, and then 12 more in Robertson Mews. And if we ever wanted to exit, these were all individually titled, so it was easy, just put them on MLS or realtor.com and you can get rid of them. And it was really medium-term rentals, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Some of them were even longer than that. And there was no damage to the units, almost none. So I went back and I analyzed it a couple of years ago. We were producing back then 18 or 19% cap rates on this portfolio, which is pretty good. And our net operating income was about $50,000 a month after paying all of our expenses. And if I put that in my wife's name, I mean, how simple would that have been when I went down the tubes along with the senators? Dawn would have had $50,000 a month of income, and maybe she wouldn't have divorced me. Maybe she would have kept her husband on. And I'm sorry, this says 5,000, but it should actually be 50,000. You can tell I did it very early this morning. So what would my life and Dawn's life be like today if we had an extra 50 grand a month in cash flow? It would be quite different, I think. But here's where Aaron, the angle that I wanted to bring in with Aaron, and that is Aaron can build sixplexes. You're going to hear about that in a few minutes, for $1 million each, which is about $170 to $200 a square foot of construction costs, which is actually very, very good in today's market. If I was building it, it would be like $300 a square foot. And I wanted to talk about Cyril, because Cyril said, what's the point of hiring a general contractor, a guy like Aaron? And he said, well, we can do it ourselves. I said, okay, Cyril, I'll tell you what, why don't you go out, and these are 4 townhouses that we built as part of Robertson Mews, beautiful townhouses, all brick and really big, very nice. Even today, they're really extraordinary. And I said, go out and price what it's going to cost to put a furnace and a mechanical HVAC system in each one of these units. And he did. He got some prices, and he came back and said, very proudly, I can do that each unit for $12,500. So there were 4 units, about 50 grand. I said, oh, great. And I had our general contractor, a guy I had my eye on it, priced the same stuff, and he came back at $5,500. So the difference was almost $30,000 between what Cyril could do and what our GC could do. And I said, Cyril, that's why we're hiring our general contractor. And if you can't control your costs, you're sunk. Think about it. It's probably about 25, maybe even as many as 30 trades needed just to build a house. And if you're out by almost 20,000 on each trade, guess what? You're sunk. So I'm really interested in today's lecture for a whole lot of reasons. And Aaron, I'm going to share this with you. I just got an email from a contractor who priced out this little coach house for me that I'm building in Belleville behind one of the properties I own there. It's like 920 square feet. Guess how? I just got the friggin' budget from him today. 420 grand he wants to build a 920 square foot teensy little coach house in the backyard. That's $457 a square foot. I said I might be able to do it for 300. So I need some help too. Here I am all these years later. I'm no better than Cyril Leeder was. Now, just before I turn it over to the boys, I'm going to ask everybody, wake up now. I'm going to ask everybody to do the match game with me. How long do you think it took me for Robertson Mews in 1987 to do the zoning, the official plan amendment, the subdivision agreement and registration, and the site plan in 87? And how long would it take in 2022? Just put in the chat box, 1987 equals and 2022 equals. I'm sure you guys, this is like, don't think too hard about this. This is pretty obvious. But anyway, everybody, you too, Aaron, come on, get your fingers going, wake up. So just to get you guys going here, I could do all of those things back in 1987 in 11 months. And today it's taking 10.5 years. Think about that. All right. And just to give you an example of that, so you don't think exactly, so you don't think I'm not being accurate. I sold some land, I think some of you know this story, to Clarence, which is a large developer in Barrhaven, which is a suburb of Ottawa. It was about 38 acres, and they spent about 11 million bucks buying it. It took them 9.5 years to do the zoning, and was already in the official plan. So they weren't doing an official plan amendment. Just to put the right zoning in place, it took them 9.5 years to rezone it. And then the pandemic whacked them and everybody else, and they were delayed another year before they could register their subdivision. It took 10.5 years before they could get their first dollar of revenue. And if you think about it, if you spend $11 million acquiring the land and $5 or $6 million over 9 or 10 years rezoning it and doing all those planning approvals, and you get your first dollar of revenue after 10.5 years, that is a long time to wait, right? And so here's the, yeah, I like that. So here's the real question for you. Why would Claridge, though, and other large developers actually like the fact that it takes 10.5 years to get a project approved? You know, you'd have to torture them to get them to admit it, but if they're maybe give them a couple of beers and loosen them up a little bit, they would admit it is so difficult and so costly to do these land developments that it keeps the competition out. Entrepreneurs are excluded from this. It limits the land supply and drastically increases the price of homes and rents. Drastically, unbelievable, exactly. And developers are hugely profitable today, the big ones, who can sustain this kind of complexity and cost and delay. And just to prove again how important committed monthly recurring revenues are, when this building on the screen here called Minto Place, which has 3 or 4 towers, and it's a downtown project, when it was under construction, I asked the co-founder of Minto who was doing the financing on this multi-$100 million, billion-dollar project, and he said, well, I just pay for it out of my cash flow. And how did he have enough cash flow to pay for a project in the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars? Well, it turns out he owns 34,000 rental units in Florida, Toronto, and Ottawa. So Minto would build, I don't know, 500 homes a year, and they would keep some of them. They would rent some of them, right? It's not a complicated model. And that when I talked to Irving in 1987, 88, so a long time ago, he told me that they had free cash flow, money you could touch, feel, and spend of $40 million a month from that property, right? So I want you guys to be thinking about building some units, developing some units, selling some, that's your cash engine, it keeps cash coming in, but keeping some so you develop committed monthly recurring revenues. And more recently, Richcraft, which is another large builder I've worked with, have converted to this model, building and selling, but also building and keeping. And Colonnade Bridgeport, where I've done some work as well. They buy land, they rezone it, they build, they lease it, they manage it, then they sell it to a REIT. Oh, I forgot the T on the REIT, real estate investment trust or pension fund or an investor group. But here's the cool thing that they do with their model is they keep anywhere from 10 to 25%, sometimes 30% of the equity for themselves. So their cash engine is selling, but retaining some ownership. I think that's probably pretty cool. And they retain the property management and they retain the leasing, right? So that's the committed monthly recurring revenues. So that gives you an idea that you can be in the land development business as Brad and Aaron are, and you can make money at it, but you have to be careful. I don't know if Karina's on the call today, but Karina, you know, we've been talking about this. Land development is a wonderful business, but these days you have to be very careful because delay after delay after delay and additional study after additional study can really put you in jeopardy if you're not super, super careful and on top of things. So there you go. That's my introduction. I'm sorry it took so long. All right, Brad and Aaron, if you don't mind, unmute yourselves and let's start, I guess, with you, Brad. what is the functional program of this sixplex? And you know, you've talked about this having some lock-off suites. You've talked about it being gigaplexed. Talked about augmented tenancies with me. Can you talk about that and tell us what you're doing with this? I think you have 6 of them that are under development now.
Yes, yeah, this is the first one, and we have another 6 in the pipeline. So, I mean, essentially, what this is, gigaplex is a fancy word for lock-off suites. So 4 of the 6 units in this sixplex, that it's about 60% done in Rockland, that Aaron's currently working on. 4 of the 6 units have so they're 2-bedroom apartments. The second bedroom has a lock-off component where it has its own ingress and egress to the exterior, and its own little kitchenette and bathroom. And the thought process behind that is, actually, believe it or not, this is pre-COVID thinking. Now it seems very obvious that, you know, the whole work from home, side hustle, you know, we bought into that very early on, even before the pandemic, that folks are going to want to start their own businesses a lot more. They don't want to rent expensive commercial space, and they want to work closer to home instead of commuting. And what better office than right next door to you in your home? So we wanted to test out this model with this first building. And like I said, we're about 60% done. It took a lot of time to get here, and I'm sure we're gonna get into that. But yeah, that's essentially what the gigaplex concept is. So you can see from the plans here. So this is the main floor with the garage. So you'll see there's actually each unit has 3 entrances, one at the front, sort of the main entrance, and then we have the side entrances, one for the main unit, and the second entrance is into that lock-off component. So you can have your own home-based business, and any customers coming in or clients would never have to interact with your personal living space, even though it is directly next door to you. So you can put up signage there, and all that kind of stuff. So
So Brad, this is the second floor, right?
correct.
Okay, so let's see if we can figure this out together. All right. You know, I still struggle a little bit with your floor plans. I love them, but you know them inside out. So you come up the stairs here, and this is the main entrance to the second floor unit, correct?
Correct.
And you come in here, and you've got a unit here with a bedroom here somewhere down here like
Nope.
this.
Yeah, so the 2 bedrooms are on the right at the back, with access to the deck.
Right.
And yes, you're right. So you come into a main landing, and then you can go straight into the main unit.
Yeah.
Or if you turn left, there's there's a door there, so you can lock it off, and go into that gigaplex unit, the lock-off unit.
So this second bedroom here, if I've got it right, has its own bathroom. It has its own micro kitchen. It has its own bedroom. It has access to the deck. What is this? Is this a window here?
Yes.
All right. So what Brad and Aaron have created is they have created, on the ground floor, they have 2 units. On the second floor, they have 2 units. It's only 2 stories, right?
2 stories, and then the basement unit, just standard 2-bedroom apartments.
Right. So on the ground floor, guys, and on the second floor, you've got 2 units on the ground floor, 2 units on the second floor. But those units have been gigaplex. They actually have, each of them have a lock-off suite. So there's really, in a way, 4 units on each floor. So that's how I came up with 10. That's why I called it a 6-plex, 10-plex, although we wouldn't say that out loud, certainly not publicly, but it is a 6-plex, 10-plex, right? Because it could be a 10-plex.
Yeah.
All right. And then this is, I think, the basement. And the basement, if I'm going to go back a few slides here, the basement is a walkout condition. And I think that's really important. Do you want to just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so just given the land that we bought and the natural slope that it had, we could do walkout basement units, which adds a lot of value to, you can put out outdoor patios back there and get a lot more sunlight.
Yeah, it's really important. So, okay, so here's the isometric again. So there's only 2 garages, though. Those garages belong to the ground floor units.
Correct.
And then the second floor units don't have a garage, but they do have a balcony.
Yes, they've got a very large outdoor patio.
Right, here's the outdoor balcony, and then the basement units have private patios.
Yep.
Right, so if you think about it, every single unit has something that differentiates itself from the rest of the building, and I think that's really important in design. We're going back now to the ground floor plan, and so the ground floor is kind of even more interesting in a way. You've got the main entrance here, and then you've got the bedroom here, and then you've got a side entrance here, which gets you, if you want, to both the main floor, sorry, the main unit and the lock-off suite, correct?
Right, and the lock-off suite also has an exterior entrance.
Exactly. So this one can be a true gigaplex in the sense that this unit, this micro suite back here or lock-off suite could in fact be rented as a business. You know, if you're a coach or if you're a registered massage therapist, you know, I guess even if you're running a small day home, you could have a little area here for your little kids to come and visit and stay with you. And it has its own ingress and egress to the outside. And every time you add a door, would you agree with this, Brad and Aaron? Every time you add a door to the outside, whether it's even just a bedroom, it adds value.
Yeah, but it's a headache for Aaron.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us why it's a headache?
Well, it just adds, the plan is amazing, but there are more doors than I've ever installed in probably 4 houses together. It just adds cost, additional framing, additional thinking too, like more cabinets, more plumbing.
Yeah.
I would say all in per unit, I did a little bit of math this morning, it probably adds about $10,000 per unit to make this into a gigaplex. So it's not an outrageous amount of money. It falls more on me on the thinking side, but the money is worth it.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna play this video, and this is for everybody, and I'll turn it up. And Aaron, if you can just make sure, just give me the thumbs up if you can hear it. I just want to play it again for everybody. This was the very first woman who became an augmented tenant. All right, I want you guys to listen. It's only 2 minutes. It's kind of heart-wrenching, and I really liked it.
At first, I was very hesitant because I wasn't sure if I could handle like what it entitled for me. But then getting to know a little bit more about it, I was kind of open to the idea, but still a little hesitant. But thank you, Alex, for explaining everything to me and making me more at ease with it. It's helped me immensely. It's helped with the rent. It's helped with the things around the house. They do help. It helps to be able to rely on someone since we do have a good relationship with the people downstairs. They also have tech, so they take care of mine. So it's actually built a friendship, and it's turned out really great. Yes, actually, because well, it's actually really helping. Like I said, that they are great tenants. But I think it would because, first of all, like I said, it lowers the rent. So for me, it's kind of a take to be living in this really great place. Like, and it's big, so it's perfect for us. And it's actually pretty simple. So yeah, definitely I would agree with your failure on it. Hard to think of it like that because I've never even thought of having it like that. But simply referring me as the landlord, kind of like, ooh, okay. But yes, I do feel like this is a little bit more at my home since I have a little bit more control of what's going on here. And I thought it would be hard, but within a week we found him, and with my property manager and with you, Alex, it was nice to be able to come on someone to help me show their house and explain like answer all the questions and whatnot. But you know, it was actually pretty easy. And I'm really thankful for that. Yeah, so I signed my lease in mid-March, and I had someone a week after. So I had someone before April 1st, which is whenever they came in. So it felt great, and even my first month rent, I didn't have to pay it. Oh, great. I definitely would recommend it to anybody who could do it.
So I really think, I hope you enjoyed the little video that Alex Culligan did for us. This was a lady who rented a house and had the right from the landlord to become the sub landlord to sublet the lower level, which was not did not have its own ingress and egress, to somebody that she chose, and they would share the revenues, but she would do all the work, and she became a sub landlord. It meant that some of her rent was subsidized by her own efforts, and it worked really, really well, and it helped her afford something with her 3 kids that she couldn't have afforded on her own. If you think about it, let's go back to the ground floor again. Let's assume for the moment, again, I'm just going to walk you through it, that Prof Bruce, is an old dude, which he is, and he rents this nice 2-bedroom flat. So Aaron, what would you rent this 2-bedroom flat for? I mean, what would you rent it to me if you rented me the whole thing?
We're looking probably in the range of somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500.
So let's say, just for the sake of it, $2,500 for me to rent this nice 2-bedroom. But then Brad and Aaron would give me permission in their lease for me to be a sub landlord, or to become a sub landlord. Okay, everybody clear so far? And so I decide to put this lock-off suite on Airbnb, perhaps, or I decide to take another elderly person. Maybe I have my personal support worker certificate, and I can look after somebody even older than me, right? And typically now you're paying anywhere from $3,500 a month to, I don't know, as much as $8,000 a month for a retirement residence. And so if I'm a PSW, I have a nice apartment that I'm renting from Brad and Aaron for $2,500, but maybe I'm renting this and taking care of an elderly person in her or his 80s or even 90s, and I'm charging them $3,500 a month. So now I'm living at a negative cost. But then, because Brad and Aaron are so brilliant, they say, oh, but Bruce, if you're going to be a sub landlord, we want, Aaron and Brad want some share of that, a percentage rent. So maybe they take 25%. So what happens now is I'm paying them $2,500 a month for the entire thing. And I'll just make it easy, 20% of my $3,500, so another $700. So now Brad and Aaron making over $3,000 a month from their 2-bedroom apartment, not doing any extra work, just getting some extra money. And I'm living there for a negative $300 a month. That is augmented tenancy. And Brad and Aaron, I've been using it now more and more in commercial, because this works just as well in a commercial setting as it does in a residential setting. And it's a very powerful thing. And probably the only real way we're going to provide any affordable housing is to give people the opportunity to, as Brad said earlier, to work from home or to do something with augmented tenancy. Is everybody clear on that? If not, if you're clear on it, great. If not, just put in, I need help, or I know, I don't know. And by the way, Brad and Aaron have said, if you have any questions, you put them in the chat box. They're willing to answer them at any time. So please go ahead. Oh, that's great. Okay. This is a very, very powerful concept, and people are using it now. I've got people in California, in Texas, in Florida, in BC, and Saskatoon, and all kinds of other places doing it. It really is fantastic. And, this was a beautiful testimonial, I thought. Oh, I've already done that one. Now, I'm not going to play this one. This is a 13-minute video of explaining the augmented tenancy. And what I'm going to do before we break, if I don't forget, is I'm going to put in the chat box a number of links that for you guys, so you can download them before or after the class. This is a corny homemade video I made. It's about 13 minutes long. It explains augmented tenancy. And I was supposed to present that in 2019, 2020 at the Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Beijing. And then the pandemic happened, and obviously that never happened. So this is a video still not public. I never got a chance to present it, but the augmented tenancy thing, I think, is it's not putting a man or woman on Mars, but it's still important. And I'll make sure you get that link. All right. Now, Brad, are there any other animations that you can think of that for one of your sixplexes that would make sense to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the big ones were storage and workshops that would bring in additional revenue.
So say that again. I was reading the chat box. Apologize.
Yeah, no, the big ones we're considering is storage and workshops.
Right, right. Well, we've talked about the workshops, so people are probably sick of it now. I don't know, I must have gone through a couple of slides. So I think that makes a lot of sense. You've got a nice big backyard. You're going to have some private patios. And Brad and Aaron, we've talked about it before. Private patios are worth a hell of a lot more than ones that are shared by everybody. If they're shared by everybody, the only people who use them are teenagers to smoke weed and drink beer and do whatever they do. And if they're private, then you'll see little trikes and bikes and barbecues and whatever else. So private patios where possible, certainly storage sheds and workshops are fantastic. The other thing that again, it's a theme of mine, I keep harping on it, is to add some really simple, not expensive games. Pickleball's a little bit of an expense, but certainly a bocce court, a horseshoe ring, a giant Jenga, outdoor ping pong, a croquet set. These are not expensive items, and they can really add a lot of value. Tenants that play together, they stay longer, they're happier, they pay more money. All right, next. So Aaron, what were the issues like when you dealt with the city in terms of getting a building permit?
The way Brad and I work, Brad takes care of all the front end project stuff. So he's dealing primarily with the city, and I do all the back end dealing. So this is probably a better Brad question than me.
Okay.
That's yeah. So actually I had a number of conversations with developers in the area about these plans before we even submitted them to the city. And more than half were saying that the city's never going to approve the lock-off unit. Yeah. They had never seen it before. It was too weird. The city wasn't going to approve it. The great thing about our model is that we only build in secondary and tertiary markets. So that has a number of benefits and a couple challenges, but the biggest benefit is that we know the city, you know, Aaron and I have sat down with the mayor a bunch of times on specific projects. I don't think you can do that in Ottawa. We have a direct line to the town planner and the construction manager. So we were in constant communication with them about this. And we actually we initially were going through rezoning. We ended up having to go through official plan amendment, which is one step above. And it only took 12 months, and that was during the pandemic. We have a great relationship with the city, so the permits were actually not an issue at all.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. And you were able to do an official plan amendment in less than 10 years.
Yeah, 1987 style.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. So there are benefits apparently in having good relations with your mayor, your councillor, your neighbors, the planners, the building inspectors, and you know, a year is reasonable. Obviously, 9 or 10 years is not.
Yeah.
All right. How did you find this site? And I know you got it for a reasonable price. So how did you find it? And apparently, how many of these are there? 6 or 7 of these under development, these projects?
So we currently have 4 in the pipeline, and we're looking at additional lots pretty much as we speak to get more. Mm-hmm. But all of our properties, even the current ones in the acquisition pipeline, are all off market deals. Wow. So this one was brought to us by a realtor, and we took a look at it. And the owner had tried to sell it before, couldn't sell it. We came in and looked at it, and when we look at lots, we're always looking at additional lines of or options for future development. So this lot is actually was 2 lots that were combined. So we looked at this, and yes, it had the option to do 1 development, but also during the official plan amendment, we could sever and then have an additional bonus lot, so to speak, to do a second. The city is going to allow a 5-plex on the lot next to this that we're going to start construction on relatively soon. So we always look for those additional value adds for the lots that we're looking at.
Fantastic. Alex DiNardo is asking, how do you monitor a subtenancy? So I've done a number of them myself, and I've got a number on percentage rents. I think I told you guys I got 1 workshop in the backyard, which is almost 800 square feet, which is rented. I've got one of my triplex units is rented to a young woman with 3 children, single mom, and she runs her yoga studio out back in about almost 800 square feet. So she pays a base rent on the workshop, but she also pays a percentage rent. And so Alex, what happens is she has to give me an accounting of her sales at the end of each month. And within 15 days, she has to remit, in Maya's case, 4% to me. She's such a nice young person. I normally would have charged her 6 or 8%, but I didn't. It's just me, I guess, being stupid. But I like her and I wanted her to be successful, and she is. And so she pays 4% percentage rent. Now she could lie. She could say, "Well, I only sold, I only brought in $8,000 last month." She's doing about $120,000 to $130,000 a month from her backyard neighborhood yoga studio. So about $10,000 or $11,000, $12,000 a month, which is very good compared to what she was before as a studio. As an employee, as an instructor in somebody else's school, where she was making $37,000. So she makes about $115,000 from her backyard studio, and she pays about $5,000 extra. She could lie, but I have the right to audit her books twice a year. I've never done that, but I could. And but these augmented tenancies are so valuable that if she ever got caught cheating, it's a serious issue, obviously. So I haven't had an issue with it, but I do have the right to audit her books. So I don't know if that helps, but that's what we have as a protection for the landlord. We have another question from let's see, before I get to it, a couple of others. I think one from Jake. What size workshop do you recommend, Bruce? Well, my workshops vary. I've got some as small as 200 square feet. In fact, I've got some that are really just mini offices in backyards, which are 104 square feet. So I've got like a mini office, which would be like adequate for RMT, Jake, 104 square feet, no building permit required. I've got some that are 200 square feet. I've got some that are 400 and 800. Now, I don't have a backyard workshop as large as some of my clients do. Some of my clients have 1,600 square foot workshops, but I've not gone that big. So mine go from 200 to 800, with a few that are just literally mini offices. And then another question from Jake is for you, Brad. How did you show the kitchenette on the permit plans? Were they just considered a wet bar?
Yeah, I think Aaron answered that. It's a small kitchenette with 3 lower cabinets and 1 upper bar sink.
Oh, yeah, he did. I just can't read more than one sentence at a time, apparently. Then Karina asks, you had to do an OP amendment and SPA. Did you have to do a site plan agreement as well?
Yeah.
And how long did that take?
In all, it took 12 months.
Oh, including the site plan?
Yep.
Wow, I'm really jealous.
And that was during COVID too. So if it hadn't have been COVID, we probably could have gotten it done in about 8 months.
And Karina asks, you submitted the plans as a 6-plex, correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay. And what is the lot size? Jessica's asking, what is the lot size of the lot for the project we just went through?
It's about 40 by 120.
And what was the zoning on it? Once you rezoned it, what did you rezone it to?
The entire lot was zoned R2. So yeah, that allowed up to 3 units.
Yeah.
And then we rezoned it to R3 dash, I forget the actual number, but we're allowed up to 11 units on both lots.
On both.
Total.
Okay. And how did you fund or finance the project, and what structure did you use? That's Leah asking that.
Yeah, so for land acquisition, we had a small group of JV investors who took some equity, no debt. And then for soft costs, we funded that ourselves for all the rezoning and all that kind of stuff. And then we had construction. We're in the construction financing phase now, where we're getting construction draws. Like I said, we're about 60% complete. So we've gotten about 60% of that funding. And then we will roll that into more conventional financing once we're complete.
And Karina's asking, what did the site plan and official plan amendment, how much money did you spend on lawyers and planners and others to get that done?
Yeah, no, great question. In all, I was looking at the numbers this morning. It was about $60,000 for the different studies and fees, and that's not permit fees. We had to pay. Rockland has high development costs, $20,000 per door, but just in soft costs for all the requirements for the OP was about $60,000. We would have had to do quite a few of those for the permits anyway, but yeah, it was about $60K.
So Karina, if you remember, for my little bunkie that I wanted to build for my daughter, excuse me, the 1-bedroom 542 square foot bunkie next to the barn dominium project. The city of Ottawa wanted me to spend $121,000 in studies and fees. And I told them to get lost, that I wasn't going to do that. So you can imagine the difference between a smaller town like Brad and Aaron are working in at $60,000 for a sixplex that is fantastic versus $121,000 in studies and fees for a tiny bunkie. I mean, it is completely stupid. And the city of Ottawa is not unusual. I mean, try and get something approved in Seattle or Portland or Boston or San Francisco. They're just as bad, maybe, well, they could be worse, but they're just as bad and just as costly. You know, I've done work with clients in those cities and LA as well. The fees are stupid, but in the smaller markets, the time is reasonable. A year, the price was reasonable. I mean, $60,000 in legal fees and planning expenses to do site plan and official plan amendment. That is fantastic.
That is, I find too that the big component of this soft cost is the application fees. You know, like it's probably cheaper out there in Rockland, I'm thinking, but in Ottawa, like you're easily spending another 50, 60 just in applications.
Yeah, yeah. It's really, it's stupid. It's impossible to produce affordable housing in cities like Ottawa, just as it's just not going to happen unless we blow up the system somehow. Okay, we've already talked about this rezoning, but Brad, this kind of shows that you did get an extra lot out of this. Can you just explain what we're seeing on the screen here now?
Yeah, exactly. So the building on the right there, the 6 unit, was vacant land. The building on the left, there is an existing duplex on there that we are demolishing. So essentially, when we bought the property for $350,000 2 years ago, there was just the duplex on that big lot with that open side lot. So again, looking at this lot, we were really excited about the development potential because we knew we had 2 projects easily on this lot.
So you could build another sixplex on this part of the property.
Yeah, so that's already been approved by the city. That was part of the OPA. That's going to be a 5-plex because the city initially said we'll allow up to I think they said 16 units on both lots, and then we started going through the process, and they said, well, maybe 11. So we settled on 11.
It's fantastic, and you've done extremely well. And this was an off-market deal, correct?
Yes.
And a realtor brought it to you, and the seller was having trouble selling it. Why do you think that he or she, the seller, you know, look, what makes you and Aaron so much smarter than the average person?
I don't know about smarter, Bruce, but we take our businesses very seriously. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call can relate to this. You know, 80% of the mom and pop landlords that I deal with out there are either not really good at running their businesses, or they treat their customers as the enemy. They treat the tenants very, very poorly. And there's a lot of people who have had these properties for years and they're just sitting on them and they don't want to continue running their businesses. So a lot of the properties we've actually acquired are from landlords who are really not great at what they do and just want out of the game. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I want to underline that for everybody. Your tenants are your clients. They're not your enemy. That's beautifully put. Leah is asking, how would you pick a small town? I mean, obviously, you know, you live in Rockland and you like it and it's doing very well economically. How do you know, if Leah was looking, and Leah, I have some comments, but I'm going to let Brad and Aaron talk first, and then I'll add whatever I can afterwards.
Yeah, so we have a very interesting model, and I think I'll take a step back here. What our development company does is missing middle multifamily. So anywhere from 2 units up to the biggest we've done is 16, although that's fairly large for missing middle. And missing middle really refers to that sweet spot of low rise, you know, low density apartments that, again, it's called missing because we have very little of it. And, you know, post World War II, with the advent of the automobile and urban sprawl and suburbs, I can get into the history lesson for days about this, but essentially we have very few of these types of purpose-built rental apartments across North America. So you're starting of these small multifamily developments, and we're trying to be leaders in that space. So the beauty about this model is that you don't need a very big rental market to absorb 6 units or 12 units or, 4 sixplexes. We're in Russell, we're in Embrun, we're in Rockland, we're looking at even smaller towns like Hammond. And so really, like in a town like Rockland, we could build 12 of these and be okay. The great thing for us from a small town perspective is that these communities have very little purpose-built rentals, and the rentals that are there are 90% garbage. They're old, they're decrepit, they're not taken care of by the landlord. So when we come into these markets, even if they're very, very tiny, and build these beautiful, small, missing middle multifamily units, the ability to rent these out is very easy. And vacancy rates in these small towns are almost zero because there's no rentals, and the rentals that are there are garbage. So I don't really have a population number. I would put a sixplex in 30 small towns around Ottawa tomorrow if I had the money and the capacity. And that's what actually we're aiming towards. So yeah, I don't have a sort of quantitative answer to that question. I apologize.
I think that's an excellent answer. And I would only add this, that I look for small towns within an hour or two of a larger center. I look for towns and cities that have at least 4 economic engines. Even small towns can have multiple, economic engines. Ottawa, for example, which is, about 1.3 million people, including Gatineau, which is the sister city across the river, has a few economic engines: technology, government, tourism, real estate, services, education, and healthcare. So 6 or 7, significant economic engines. Toronto has more. They have an entertainment industry and a finance industry and an automotive industry, which is very, very large. But even small towns, they can have real powerful economic engines. But if they only have one economic engine, like if they're dependent on a coal mine, for example, and the coal mine shuts down, that really causes an issue. So I look for some diversity in economic engines. But I'm with Brad. I think some of these small towns with 3, 4, 5, 6,000 people have been completely overlooked, but they're within an hour or two of a larger center, in this case, Ottawa. And I think Brad and Aaron's plan is excellent. All right, did I miss anything in the chat box? I think Brad and Aaron are way ahead of me on this, so I'll leave it for now. All right. So let's go back to our screen. So this is my, I'm out of my mind about this not being able to build that bunkie for my daughter, and I promise not to bring it up every lecture. But imagine having to spend spending $121,000 in application fees and studies, and it might not be approved, to get this tiny bunkie that makes up 0.003 of the site approved. It makes no sense at all. And one of the things I've discovered in the last 2 weeks, this is new, okay, so I'm not just sitting on my hobby horse, flogging the poor animal. I just discovered something new I didn't know about. I should have known about it, but there's a thing, and I'm just going through the plans here. You've seen it before. Here's the floor plan for the bunkie. But there's a new thing, Brad, I didn't know about, Aaron. It's brand new to me and to the class. It's called an MZO. I think it would be MZO in the States. Ryan Hughes is with us from Idaho, so he probably would call it MZO, but I call it MZO. And it's called a ministerial zoning order. Brad, have you ever heard of this?
No.
Okay, so it's brand new to me too, but it exists and it's being used more and more. An MZO is, you can go to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and request an MZO. And if the minister decides to issue one, it overrides every planning study, every obstacle, every NIMBY, every not in my backyard, protester, everything that, the normal process, agricultural zoning, anything that's an impediment to building is wiped out immediately with this one signature by the minister. And I'll give you all one guess who's going to be the next applicant for an MZO and for what purpose. I am infuriated that I can't build this sweet little bunkie for my daughter, and I'm going to apply for a ministerial zoning order, and I'm going to, I suspect I might get it. And when I do, I'm going to go visit the planners and others who wanted me to spend $121,000 and tell them this is what I did instead. All right, and you can see this is the breakdown of the fees. And I think I shared with everybody something I probably shouldn't, but I will anyway. It's an unlisted video, remember that, is rather than spending $121,000, what we did this summer was we wheeled this thing onto the barn dominium site. It sits right next to the barn, and it's a modular home, I guess a tiny home or whatever you want to call it, and we hooked it up to the well and the septic and the electrical, and there you go. It's about 400 square feet of living space, believe it or not, in this thing. All right, so we're coming back now to you, Aaron. How do you pick the right general contractor? And I wrote this joke. I mean, I didn't write it. I stole it from the internet. A contractor dies in a tragic accident on his 40th birthday. At the pearly gate, St. Peter welcomes him, congratulating him on reaching the grand old age of 160. The contractor says, "That's not right. I only lived to be 40. "Impossible," says St. Peter. "I added up all your timesheets." So how do you pick the right contractor, so that I don't have to spend $420,000 on a 920 square foot coach house in Belleville?
I think the very first thing about picking the general contractor is the relationship piece. And that's kind of a theme that runs through everything I think of. You will be with this person in some capacity for 6 months, 8 months, maybe 2 years, going through planning, problems, pricing. And the most important thing is that two people can sit down, respect each other, and get through all this stuff. Because this is like building the beginning of a relationship. If you don't have that fundamental in place, I wouldn't worry about the price. I really wouldn't, because you need to find ways to circumvent what will become lots and lots of problems. It's the reason that Brad and I worked so well together. We broke bread first. We weren't necessarily friends, but we were respected colleagues. And then when things come up, it's very easy to talk them through. So that would be my very first thing to go through, is to make sure that that relationship piece is intact, and you know that you can be with that person for 2 years, 3 years if things don't go well.
That's great. I think trust is the number one thing in life. You've heard me say that before, everybody. And whether you're talking about your spouse, your life partner, your business partner, your contractor, trust is really important. And I think breaking bread and establishing a good relationship based on trust is paramount. If you get a number like I got this morning for I was expecting between 250 and 300,000. I got 420. What would you do with a contract like that, Aaron? Would you throw it out and get another contractor? I mean, or would you sit down and say, what the hell?
Wow. The first thing you do is sit down and make sure that is there a big mistake made in there somewhere? If he's willing to and able to open up the books, by having a look at the books, you probably are going to find something logistically that he's either double dipped or made a mistake on a size. It's probably a very simple explanation. And he at least deserves, he spent the time to do, as a contractor, he spent the time to prepare the estimate. He at least deserves the chance to prepare maybe a second one or a revised estimate to cut in line. I really believe that these things take a lot of time to put together. So that is the beginning of that respect piece, right? Like, I'm going to spend my time to do this. At least give me a chance to come back at it with a different way, a different design. One of the big things too, I did a lot of commercial work many moons ago, and I think having a commercial background really makes me a pretty good general contractor, because residential guys and commercial guys, they think very differently. Commercial are much more able to look at big picture. They understand project flow a little bit better. Most residential guys just end up inheriting a company, end up kind of coming into a back door, right? So they decide one day they're doing floors, the next day they're building houses. That's unfortunately the reality of a lot of this industry. Knowing that someone has done some larger projects, that has the ability and the capacity to understand not just the project, but how the home works. So that when you get into, you said, we looked at a bunch of plans today. Plans don't really take into account a lot of HVAC stuff. They don't really take into account kitchens or electrical layouts or where plumbing goes. that general contractor has to be able to think, 12, 15 steps ahead. So knowing that they understand a lot of like the veins of the building, so that plumbing, electrical, HVAC side really will in some cases save you a ton of money, because the thought is done and you're not doing things twice. You're not having to fix things once drywall's up. That part is really, really important as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I think you're right. I will certainly sit down with my contractor and discuss it, because I'm very fond of Adam, but yeah, I need to work on that. All right. One of the things I did when I was building the Palladium Canadian Tire Center was I structured my situation a little bit differently than some people do. What I did was I hired a general contractor by the name of PCL. It's one of the biggest, maybe it is the biggest general contractor, or one of the biggest anyway, in North America. So I hired them, and they worked with me on building the arena, which was back then, it was what did we spend on it? I think 240 million on the building. Today it would be $1 billion, but back then 30 years ago it was a $240 million project. And what I did was I established with PCL going in that they would work on a fixed fee, that there would be a certain amount of money that they needed to mobilize their very capable group, and that was the fee. And then what I did, Aaron, was I made sure that PCL at that point was sitting on the same side of the table as the owner, me, and that they were looking out for my interest. Now, in addition to that, I hired a project manager, construction manager, development manager who was very experienced. He had done many, many large projects, and I paid him a fixed fee to sort of keep watch on the general contractor and to keep watch over the entire project. And he was on a fixed fee as well. Then we put together the architects and the engineers. And again, I didn't pay them on a percentage of the project, because if it's a percentage of the project for your engineers and architects and others, it gives them every reason to make the budget bigger and bigger and bigger. If you're getting 3% of a project that costs 300 million instead of 240 million, you're getting more money. So they were also on fixed fees. And what we did then was we put together a team, and all of these people sat on the same side of the table as the owner. Who was on the other side of the table? On the other side of the table were the trades and the sub-trades. So what we did was we produced a set of working drawings, and those went out to bid. So all the trades and sub-trades were in competitive bidding. But the general contractor, it was not a competition. And as a result, we were able to do that project for $236 million, so $4 million under budget. And we did it in, I think it was 25 months instead of 30 months. So we were able to cut about 4 or 5 months off the project time, which was very important, because we went from playing in a 10,000 seat arena to playing in a 20,000 seat arena. So big revenue increase there. And we were able to deliver it under budget. By comparison, at the same time that we were building the Palladium, the province of Ontario was building the Sky Dome, which is now called Rogers Place in Toronto. Their estimate for the budget, Aaron, was $150 million to build the Sky Dome. Then when they finally finished, their total price for that building was $650 million. So they were, $500 million over budget, $500 million over budget. And we were, I think, $4 million under budget. That's, of course, the difference between a private developer and a public, publicly funded project like the Sky Dome. And just to rub salt into the wounds for every taxpayer on the call who happens to live in Ontario right now, I'm going to ask everybody if anybody knows what the Ontario government sold that building for to Rogers Communication, a big telecommunications company. Anybody know? $25 million. I did a calculation that if the province of Ontario had said, look, if anybody wants to buy the Sky Dome, we'll sell it to you for $25 million. I was teaching at, I think, Sprott School of Management at the time, Sprott School of Business. I said to my class, 35 or 40 young entrepreneurs, I said, if they had told me and the class could have found $25 million in 2 weeks, and we could have bought it, we would have torn down the Sky Dome and sold off all kinds of little and big lots, and it was worth about $1 billion even back then in land. They sold $1 billion worth of land, just raw land underneath that building for $25 million. Now that is atrocious, right? Okay, enough of that. So Aaron, what, you know, if you were recommending to the developers and would-be developers on the call here, and they're doing a sixplex or they're doing a bigger project like the Palladium, what structure would you use?
So I'll tell you what I wouldn't use. And again, coming from a commercial background, so competitive bidding is an amazing tool to find the lowest price. Most commercial companies that I work with have people in their office design, once they win the contract, to find extras. So competitive bidding, although you'll get a very cheap front end price, you end up with typically a more expensive build. If you do decide to go down the path of competitive bidding, I would move more towards like the Scandinavian model, where they'll throw out the high, they'll throw out the low, and they'll usually pick something in the middle. So you know that it's not only is it a competitive bid, but it's probably a fair bid. Because there are companies that just, they'll throw in something really low, get the project, and then from then on, they're looking to gouge you like on every last thing, which will make your life miserable and cost you more money and stress. I don't think it's worth it, in my opinion. I love almost exclusively, I only work on time and material now. This ties back into the respect and the relationship piece we talked about earlier. I open up my books. So Brad and the other two main investors we have, I send them weekly updates on the labor side, so they know my labor rates. I send them all the material bills. I put a very small markup just to kind of cover overhead on it. What's nice for me on that is I know it protects me every week. I know approximately what I'm going to make. I wouldn't make as much as if I had provided a price, but I also know it helps them keep their costs down. And it's the reason that I actually think we'll build to this sixplex probably closer to 8 or 850 than $1 million. And in that regard, again, it just goes right back to the relationship side. Without that, this doesn't happen. With it, and the addition of me being an equity investor in this project, it makes things a lot more interesting, right? So I know I can provide value. I've been doing this 25 years, so they now have access to all of my supplier lines. They have access to my discounts. And every time I throw in an order for 50 windows, my discounts technically get a little bit better. So this becomes like a win-win-win scenario if it's set up properly, and if you feel that you can move forward, and that trust piece, relationship piece, like I'll just keep harping on that. So
good. And you know, there are a lot of players in this team that you're putting together for large and small projects. Often the architects like to control projects. And, you know, I taught 14 years of architecture in the Israeli School of Architecture and Urbanism, but I'm not sure I would want an architect in charge of a project. Who do you think is the right person to lead the project, Aaron?
I would say the GC, the construction manager, is the right person. Architects, all drawings on paper are beautiful. Many times they're not functional. They're also a little bit harder to, the day-to-day problems that arise from, not, I wouldn't say bad plans, but plans with holes in them are not solved over the phone. They're solved boots on the ground, because time is money in this business, as everyone knows. Waiting, sending an email with a picture, and that time lag that happens is a disaster. So the fact that, again, I'm partly an owner in this, so it's very easy. I sat down with Brad and the rest of the team. I'm like, can I just, you know, it's a rental unit. Does anyone really care that this is yellow or purple or pink? And when the answer was no, I'm like, well, let me just build this the way I know I can do it the fastest with the materials that are available. As everyone knows, it's been a serious challenge for materials over the last 2 years. And then it's really easy to shift on the fly when I don't have to go back to 3 different people and get approvals. Approvals cost money, they take time.
That's fantastic. I have a couple more questions for you, Aaron. How do you handle change orders? And how do you share savings, if you have savings, between the owner, the general contractor, the architect, anybody else?
So change orders in our current structure, they don't really exist. I just make the changes and we just progress on a time and material basis. When I was doing change orders, especially on the commercial and the larger residential side, typically the OCA, the Ottawa Construction Authority, they're looking at a markup of 10 and 5. So 10 overhead, 5 profit. And then everything is kind of bundled in. Change orders are a really amazing way to make money as a contractor, to be very honest, because again, we go back to that. There's a team of people actually looking for problems and plans, and there are so many of them that you'll be overwhelmed with change orders. So if there's a way that you feel comfortable to avoid that, stay away from it. It's too much money.
One of the things I did with the Canadian Tire Center again was I did put a contingency budget in there, was in the millions of dollars, and I told PCL, I want you to spend every dollar of the contingency budget. I don't want that to come back to the owner or split somehow. Spend that ensuring that we have a good quality finish to the building.
Yeah.
But I said, if you can save some time or you can save some money outside of the contingency budget, then what we did was 50% of that came to the owner and 50% of that came to the general contractor, in this case, PCL. And we also put in some incentives for, early delivery, which they managed to do by 4 or 5 months. Because if you think about it, an extra 10,000 tickets for 20 games at $100 a ticket, I don't know what that amounts to, but 10,000 tickets, times $100 times 20 games, that's 20 million bucks of additional revenue. And so we put in some additional incentives for them to help us reach our goals. And that's how we did it. On the next slide, I'm going to ask you this. How do you deliver your projects on time? Are you using critical path software?
I'm not. I did on the larger projects, I've used Microsoft Project. On these smaller projects, in particular in the last 2 years, it's almost pointless. There's just too many conflicts. There's too many. There's been too many roadblocks, and it really the ability to be flexible is pretty much the most important thing that I've seen over the last 2 years. Where you're seeing projects move forward and stay on budget, it's because either the owner or the GC or the combination is willing to make some sacrifices, move some things around, because being static and thinking, and I don't know the supply chain it is not fixed. It does not look like it'll be fixed for a little bit. That flexibility in thinking of your end product as not your home, but as a rental unit, if you can do that, then these things can move forward quite easily. And really what it's really come down to for me is I have an amazing team. I have a site supervisor on site. She's calling me all the time. This didn't show up. What do you want to do? And the question is, no, what can we do? And then you just pick the best available option. I wish there was a more technical answer, but these last 2 years are just, they're unbelievable. So
I did a critical path schedule for this vet clinic where I'm the development manager. It's a small building. It's 5,400 square feet. Beautiful, beautiful new veterinary clinic that we're building. And it showed that the project would be delivered to the client in 2024. When he saw that, the doctor saw that, he freaked out. I thought I was going to get fired, but he didn't fire me. And we just got in for site plan actually this week. We've been at it for 2 years. And he called me up the other day and said, I can see why you put 2024 in there. So I'm with you on Aaron. The value of critical path software has become less valuable because we really have a supply chain that is FUBAR. And I won't tell everybody what FUBAR stands for, but it's not good. Let's go to the next thing. I understand you're thinking about a rebrand for your company to something called Rethink Construction, which is kind of a cool idea. What's behind the idea of your rebrand?
Well, a little bit it will be Hammond Hill, which I think we get into in a few slides.
Yep.
But it's over the last 2 years, I've had a lot of time to think about how to move forward. The genesis for me was going to the dump one day and just seeing truck after truck, building after building being dumped at the dump. I'm thinking like there has to be a way that we can do this a little bit better. The Hill really forced that critical thinking to move forward where, I bought a sawmill. We started milling our own wood. I started designing some of my own projects so that we looked at minimizing wastage, overuse, things that we could keep out of landfills, trying to find a way to upcycle. And it really, I have kids. I only have 3. Brad wins on the kid race, but the idea that we can do better, in particular in construction, because we are a throwaway business. There is no value in keeping leftover items, which will tie back into we had talked about sheds earlier. I actually think we're going to be able to build all of the sheds on the property with leftover material. So I've actually been stockpiling sheeting, which normally it just goes into a dumpster, and it doesn't have to. I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel. I'm talking about putting recycling bins on facilities, taking leftover wood and doing something else with it that adds value down the road. These aren't new thinkings. They're just need to happen thinkings.
I actually really, when I saw this, Aaron, in the slides, I thought, I really like it. I like it better than AIM construction. I think Rethink is a wonderful, powerful name. And you see on the slide here as well, everybody, greenwashing. A lot of companies, whether they're construction companies or tech companies, they're doing greenwashing. That just means that they're doing things that are meaningless and unimportant, but they're saying it, look how green we are, you know, pumping up their chests and saying how green they are. What you want to do, what we all want to do when we're in the development industry, is we do want to be more green, but we want to do things that not only help the environment, but are economic, make economic sense as well. Because I have said many times that nothing is sustainable unless it's also economically sustainable. And things like hot water, solar hot water, work really well, even in a cold northern shelf city like Ottawa. You know, these are not only does it work well and reduce your hot water bills, but you know, it makes economic sense. It has, you know, cap rates of, you know, 6, 8, 10, 12%. And that's what you want to see from your green initiative. So you're not doing greenwashing, you're doing real things that add value to the project and also help the environment. So there you go. That's my lecture there. Okay, back to Brad. Now, we've already talked about the fact that you have joint venture partners and investors. Are you using any of the Mad River stuff that Brad, you and I've talked about? In other words, do investors put all of their money in as equity, or some of their money in as equity and some as debt?
Yeah, so when we started to do the JV structures, we chose it very deliberately to do equity to de-risk any future potential debt service, because we were new at the development game. Now that we're a bit more experienced and we have a team around us, we're looking at more. We haven't done it yet, but the Mad River style where it's equity and debt. Ideally, we'd only take debt from now on, and then not take on any debt or equity in future projects. But that's sort of the progression of our thinking around the investor picture.
So everybody understands Mad River investment techniques. We'll talk about it more in the course as we go along, but it's very simple. You know, if Brad was doing a duplex and he needed $150,000 in equity, and Brad had $75,000 of equity, and he asked Prof Bruce for $75,000, I put in 75, and we're 50-50 owners. But let's say Brad only has $10,000 of cash available, and Prof Bruce has $140,000. So I put in $140,000 of my cash, and Brad puts in $10,000. Now Brad owns, like, what is it, like 6 or 7% of the project? Well, for an entrepreneur, owning 6 or 7% of a project isn't that interesting, right? And so what I would say to Brad is, I wouldn't do that. What you might do instead is Brad might put in $10,000 of equity, and Prof Bruce might put in $10,000 of equity. So again, we're 50-50. And then the other money that we need to do the project, I would lend to the project, you know, maybe secured simply by a promissory note. So that's the Mad River technique in its simplest, and it works whether it's a small project or a very big one. And what I wanted Brad and Aaron to consider is more debt and less equity. And the reason I suggest that to all of you is that everybody thinks equity is free. It's not. Investors want a return on investment. Equity is almost always more expensive than debt. Equity is almost always more expensive than debt. So if you can reduce the amount of equity that you're taking in, so you retain more ownership and bring in more debt from friendly investors, that's a good thing in most cases. All right. So that's the Mad River technique. All right. And we'll talk more about that as we go. So the lot cost, as you heard, for this, and I didn't realize until today that I know Brad told me, but I didn't sort of like cotton to it, is that the $350,000 for that lot is actually for 2 lots. So my calculations that I'm showing on the screen now are wrong. They're even better. But anyway, just going with my numbers, the lot cost $350,000. The sixplex was built for $1 million. So, you know, not $400 a square foot, not $300 a square foot, but less than $200 a square foot, which is amazing. So the total cost of the project was 1.35 million, but actually was lower, but we're going to go with that. In the rents, I went through the rents, and I won't go through all of this, but, you know, I did my standard analysis. What are the rents? What can you get for the 2-bed? What can you get for the lock-off suite? What's the best leasing profile? And I got on a brand new construction a cap rate of 10.8%. So that leads me to the next question that I have for you, which is actually on the next slide, Brad. And then if you could get a 10.5% on new construction, or 10.8% on new construction, which is fabulous. And if you could get an appraiser or an investor group who wants to buy one of these from you, you know, who would buy it at a 5.5% cap rate, it means that your fair market value after completion of this thing is over 2.6 million. And just going back a couple of slides, or one slide, the cost is 1.35 million, and the value is really basically double that. So what is the model? Are you going to keep them all, refinance them, and hopefully pull out some, you know, tax-free cash, Brad? Or are you going to sell some and keep some?
Right now, the plan is to retain ownership of all of them. Part of our development company, the way we operate is we're vertically integrated at the front end with the acquisition team, which is myself, the construction team, which is Aaron, and then we have 2 other business partners who are on the stabilization and property management side. So the way we operate is long-term buy and hold with a number of cash out refinance opportunities for ourselves and the JVs. So, but I do appreciate the model that you're articulating here. And as we build more and scale up, I think that, you know, keeping 50%, selling 50% makes a lot of sense to me. So it's something we're actively discussing internally.
Well, that's what Irving Greenberg and Minto did for decades, and they ended up with 34,000 rental apartments with no mortgages against them and $40 million in cash flow. But part of the model was selling some.
Yeah.
Right. So what I was hoping for you, because you and Aaron are still young, is that over the next, you know, few decades, you can do a Minto and end up with, you know, maybe thousands of these and with no mortgages on them. That's pretty cool. All right. I'm struggling with an appraiser right now, and I think I emailed everybody on this week. How do you talk to appraisers? How do you get decent appraisals on your properties so you can refinance them and hopefully pull out some tax-free cash?
Yeah, I mean, there's no silver bullet for this one. We have a really good relationship with an entrepreneurial broker in town, and he has a network of appraisers, and depending on the project and what we're looking for, he can tap into that network. So yeah, I don't really have a strategy that we use. We just, again, it's all about your network.
Okay. So again, it comes down to your network and trust. All right, fair enough. I think this is the last question, or we're getting close to the last question. You know, you and I, Brad, we've talked about how to market the Gigaplex, and we haven't really perfected that yet. Between you and me, we have not. And, you know, it's a real challenge, you know, when I would like to run some ads. Hey, anybody interested, you know, if you're an entrepreneurial tenant, you apply to me, maybe you could live in my building rent-free or close to rent-free, but I'm not sure how to market it. And, you know, we're trying to explain these concepts, and even amongst a group of really smart, intelligent people on this webinar, you know, it's a bit complicated. So how do we get this across in the market?
Yeah, that's the challenge, Bruce. And, you know, as a CMO myself, and I live and breathe marketing, this is the biggest challenge for me with this project, because I know the market is out there. But when you have a product that a lot of people don't even know is out there, or don't know that they want or need, it gets hard to articulate it, especially in smaller towns, which is one of the challenges of smaller towns. So we just started advertising in the last couple of weeks, these units. It being the busy summer months, it's, you know, we haven't really heard much from the market on it, but we're going to try different avenues, whether it's blog posts or local business organizations or realtors, or, you know, this straight up Kijiji model. So we're going to try different ways. You know, Bruce, you and I talked about doing a webinar. So yeah, we haven't perfected that. We're at the early stages of the marketing challenges with the Gigaplex. But once we get the brand out there and the model is known in the market, I think it's going to be a lot easier. It's the first one's always the hardest.
Yeah, and just to talk a little bit more about it, that video that we showed, I showed the 2-minute video with that very first tenant who did the augmented tenancy. That was in Rockland, by the way, and it did take some educating. You know, she was thinking of me, what kind of scheme is this, you know? And so Alex and I, we spent quite a bit of time coaching her, you know, so she would understand it. And then she got the religion in a big way. When the light finally went on, she said, you mean I can live in this fabulous house, have control over the income, become a sub-landlord, almost have some sort of sense of ownership? I'll stay forever. So she really got on board, but it did take a little bit of education. So as Brad said, Brad and I might do some webinars for tenants. Right? Who ever heard of coaching tenants? I thought they were the enemy, Brad. All right. Okay. And we're going to go to Hammond Hill now, because it's really important. I've had you guys for 2 hours, which is way too long, but I appreciate you sticking with us. Can you talk a little bit about Briefcase?
Yeah, I mean, very simply, I do a lot of writing for prop tech companies and other companies down in the US on all things real estate, roof stocks, a few others. So about a year and a half ago, I wanted to do my own. Simply, it's a free weekly newsletter on all topics related to real estate. We try and be very conversational and accessible to make complicated issues a lot more digestible. Anyone who reads newsletters like The Hustle or Morning Brew, it's very much in that style. So this is a big passion project for me. I'm already writing a lot on real estate topics, so it's not a whole lot of additional work for me every week, but I absolutely love writing these newsletters. So we're up to about 5,000 subscribers with a average of 65% open rate, which is fantastic. Wow. So really enjoying this project, and we're going to grow to 10,000 and then sell some advertising space likely, and then see where it goes from there.
Fantastic. And I just love the thing I really love about it is there is an awful lot of heat on the development industry. We're considered rapacious, greedy, environmental catastrophes. I mean, developers are generally hated, and landlords, people consider landlords, scum of the earth, which I don't agree with. And that's why we're changing our name from landlord to rental provider. I mean that seriously. We're going to call ourselves rental providers as opposed to landlords. But this is the one newsletter that I think actually will help to rebalance that, because I think the view of the industry is very unfair. I mean, golly, everybody needs a place to live. Who's going to build it? You think the government is going to build it? Yeah, and if you think so, think about the Sky Dome, $650 million, $500 million over budget. That's what will happen in the housing industry if it's all government provided. It'll be horribly badly built. You won't have quality people like Aaron and Brad doing it. You'll have government people who really don't care, in my opinion. All right, so I would want you all to go to briefcase.email and subscribe. It's free, it's wonderful. Now, a really, really exciting project to talk about. There have been almost no campgrounds, as we heard when we started, built in the last decade in Ontario. So here's a bunch of questions for you. Why did you start Hammond Hill? What was in your mind?
As you can tell, we didn't have enough on our plate. So Aaron and I were like, well, let's build a campground.
I mean, the big thing too, like the larger story here is that we opened, I built the Broken Stick Brewery at the Hammond Golf Course about 3 years ago. Brad is also an investor in the brewery. We're sitting around, realized the owner of the golf course also owns 62 acres to the east of the golf course that was beautiful prime forest that really had no use. We looked at a few options, including a development. The city came back with a number that was a little too aggressive, and we started to rethink what we could build within the current zoning confines that would be fast, not require a lot of permits. And believe it or not, the campground, the way we constructed it, from the time we sat down to think about it, we were open in less than 10 months.
Wow.
And that was with 30 campsites, 4 tiny homes, some yurts, a variety of nature trails, the beginning of a lake. It was one of the most challenging things that I've ever built, but it was actually one of the easiest things we've ever built, if that makes sense.
And you did a land lease, right?
Yes.
And how's that working out?
Great. I mean, I'm always thinking, someone asked about plan B. I'm always thinking about how do we de-risk what we're doing? What's our exit strategy? So we framed a land lease where we essentially Hammond Hill Inc. is not paying any rent to the owner. The owner is an equity holder in Hammond Hill, and there's a fee that Hammond Hill will pay at the end of the year per nights booked. So I think the first year was like $8 per night booked, which we add into our fee structure. So if no one stays at Hammond Hill for the entire year, our rent is $0. But if a lot of people stay at the hill, then everyone wins. And it's kind of like the model with Aaron and our development company. We want it to be a win for everyone. If we're losing together. If we're winning together. So that's how we structured the land lease. And we're actually in the process now of buying the land from the landowner as well, because the land lease does have some limitations with future development. But overall, it was a great win for Hammond Hill to begin with, because it really de-risked the downside of not earning any income.
That's fantastic. You know, there's a lot of fun stuff at Hammond Hill. There's a licensed beer garden. That's very important. Beach volleyball. I keep coming back. When are we going to have pickleball?
I'm working on it.
All right. And winter camping, adult games. I mean, it's amazing. And I think the zoning is commercial tourism. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that was the existing zoning, which, Aaron, means that's why you could go from 0 to 100 in 10 months.
Yeah.
You didn't have to spend a year, or in Ottawa 10 years, but in Rockland a year, you know, doing an official plan amendment rezoning. It already allowed all the uses that are on the screen, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the great things is when we met with the city and explained what the plan was, and when you throw in catchphrases like eco and building off grid and solar power.
That's greenwashing, brother.
It's a superpower, and this project has actually made our additional projects in Rockland easier, because when you call the mayor, there's already that rapport.
Wow, that's big. Thanks very much for adding that. Aaron, I've walked the property. I love it. I mean, it's just, when I go there, my blood pressure drops and my enjoyment, you know, being in nature goes up. You know, tell us what this map is.
So the map is the layout of the facility. And one of the really cool things about this facility is that we cut in all of our own roads, and we cut in all of our own campsites. And we have about 20 campsites. We cut down 1 tree. So wow. The mandate to the people that we're working with and for us was to find sites that they would want to stay at, and find them in an area where we wouldn't have to do a lot of disruption to nature. And we were able to do it by just being creative. And the flip side, the net benefit was it was actually cheaper to do. So we ended up with this amazing situation where we're doing the right thing and not spending really that much money.
Yeah, and I don't know whether these are pictures. I think these are pictures I took. You know, you could see, guys. I mean, it's beautifully treed. It's sandy soil, which I like. You know, you've got some playful things. You got the beer garden. You look at everything, even the signage. You know, these are not plastic signs, you guys. These are. I'm sure they were done. You burned those characters, letters into white pine, I think. Here's the one of the yurts on site, and you can sort of see some of the cabins here. These are some of the original sketches. I don't remember, Brad, who did this, but she has a beautiful hand.
Yeah, that's Adele, our designer. And since that time too, we've added jupes from Texas. So we have 6 futuristic looking glamping tents. If you check out our social media, you'll see them there. But they're a Y Combinator company out of Texas. They're head designers from Tesla. So we've got some really cool glamping tents up there now, in addition to the cabins and the yurts and the campsites.
I mean, I want everybody just to focus on this for a moment. Look at the beauty of this. You know, I was, as a young engineer, I never really understood the importance of branding. I thought, you know, whatever, I'm an engineer. If it's ugly or it's beautiful, as long as it works, that's all I care about. But I was wrong. people love beauty. I love beauty. And it took me a long time to figure out the power of branding. Certainly Brad understood this long before I did, and he's much younger than me. But look at these beautiful little cabins, what are they called? Frontier cabins? What did you call them?
Pioneer homes. Yeah.
Pioneer
These are
homes. Yeah, so
built-
yeah,
Sorry.
so imagine that, Karina, if you were there, Jake, if you and Paula were there, and it's just something you all go there, you play together, your kids go together. It's really special what they're doing, and they are truly beautiful. And I don't know if you said, Aaron, I think that some of the lumber is you build on site.
Yeah, so we don't have a stamp, so none of the structural lumber is, but a lot of the siding, a lot of the fencing. As a matter of fact, these units that you're seeing being moved, I built these during COVID in my driveway because we were shut down as a site,
Yeah.
and we transported these and erected them on site.
And even inside, guys, look at the inside of these cabins. These are very small cabins. I don't remember how many square feet they are, but they're small. But they're called the Pioneer cabins, and there's a theme to it. I think I've told you guys already that theming and naming is really important. And one of my clients, a young woman, has a cabin in the middle of nowhere that she put on Airbnb, and she themed it as a real original French-Canadian cabin. And she carries that theme through everything. Well, Brad and Aaron are doing the same thing here. And you theme it, and all of a sudden, instead of getting $1,000 a month for her cabin in the middle of nowhere, she's getting $5,000 or $6,000 a month. That's branding. That's theming, right? And you can see what Brad and Aaron have done here. It's just beautiful. Now, Brad, I understand, and Aaron, that you got hit by a big windstorm. What happened?
Yeah, so May 21st, the windstorm in the area kind of knocked us down for a couple of weeks. We lost 4,000 trees on 12 acres. 12 of the 62 acres were just flattened. We're still recovering from that. We were closed for, I forget, Aaron, it was probably 3 weeks we were closed for.
Almost 2 months.
Wow.
6 weeks at least.
Yeah. So while Aaron and his team were sort of furiously trying to clean up, yeah, it was a pretty big punch in the gut for us. But as everyone on this call who are entrepreneurs know, it's, these kind of things happen. So we're in the midst of the recovery as we speak. Mother Nature has clear-cutted us another 12 acres, so we're trying to look at it positively, and we have some plans for some additional parking and an outdoor pavilion and a small living village that we're going to put a lot of cabins on. So I think net it'll be overall a positive for Hammond Hill. It was just very hard to take that day that we had 12 campers up there, and thankfully no one was hurt, which is the main thing. But it was hard to take. Looking at it looked like a disaster, like a war zone when we went and saw it a couple hours after the windstorm. So it was definitely hard to take, but we're bouncing back.
And Aaron, you have very similar water and soil conditions that I have at Dunrobin Lake, where I dug, 6 or 8 ponds. I think you're going to build 2 lakes there, right?
Yeah, we started construction on our second lake. So our first one is just under an acre, 18 feet at the deep end, and it kind of staggers up like you'd think of a traditional swimming pool to a 4 foot with a large beach area for people to kind of hang out. And the second lake will be closer to our welcome shack, plans for a skating rink in the winter. So we'll do some pretty interesting stuff to kind of augment the winter season, which traditionally campgrounds close for. I think may be our most interesting season, believe it or not.
Unbelievable. I just love it. And what were you doing here? This is Aaron, one of his daughters, and this is my handsome young friend, Brad. What were you guys doing?
The fishing day?
Yeah, well, you got to narrate the pictures, not me, brother. Aaron, you still there?
Yeah, so we were one of the challenges that we're trying to get ahead of at our lake is we don't want the water to stay still, so we want to seed it with some fish. So Bruce was kind enough to let us fish out some smallmouth bass from his lake, and we brought it back to Hammond Hill and put it in our lake. So we'll see what happens. We haven't found any dead fish yet.
Yeah, so I call these my lady die fish because the day that I caught the fish and brought them to Dunrobin Lake, which is what you're seeing on the screen here, and you'll see it again here. These were fish that I caught and released into my lake and my ponds on the day that Lady Diana died. So my lady die fish are now they're migrating from Dunrobin, Ontario to Rockland, Ontario, and who knows where else they'll end up. But you can see I really like ponds. And think about that. Brad and Aaron are creating their own waterfront just the way I do. It's one of the best ways to animate a property. Another very inexpensive way to do it is to plant trees, right? I mean, I have a forced labor group called children. I have my 5 kids, and we planted when they were little. I would go out with them every summer. We'd plant thousands of little trees, this size, that we could buy for 25 cents each. And now, of course, here we are 30 years later, they add a tremendous amount of value to a property. And what you're looking for if you're going to create your own waterfront is you're looking for, if you can find it, a sandy soil with a high water table. And all you do is you get a big excavator in there, you scoop out some sand, and the subsurface water just fills your lake beautifully, and it's filtered through sand, so it's good quality water. And this is my best drawing, I have to tell you. And there's Ella, and we also had another group out because they also have ponds. This is Lucas and his group fishing, and we had a little bit of fun that day. All right, so let's see if there's anything else we should really go through today. Let's see what else it is here. Oh yeah, I think that's enough for the day. I think we covered an awful lot, and I kept you almost 2 hours, Brad and Aaron and everybody else. But it was a fantastic what they're doing at Hammond Hill. If you're in the Rockland area, you said a few minutes ago, Aaron, that you think your winter season will be interesting. What will make it work? What will make the winter season work?
Well, we're right on the snowmobile path, which is a net positive.
Yep.
We have a beer shack, so snowmobilers tend to drink a fair bit of beer. We will be adding gasoline sales this year, so snowmobilers can come and grab a beer, grab some gas. The Hammond restaurant is the only restaurant on the east end of our trail that you can actually go in and stop and have food. We have a snowshoe path already that's almost 5 kilometers. We partnered with a company to do snowshoe races on the property.
Wow.
We have cross-country ski areas, and we are trying to, hopefully going to build a skate in the woods park that will connect 2 lakes. And I mean, it's just going to be rocket fuel. So
yeah, skate in the woods is really, really fun. And Brad just noted in the chat box, the yurts and cabins are heated as well, which is really important. Is there going to be a whiskey wonderland this year as well, this coming year?
Yeah. So in February, we're hosting a 500-person whiskey festival at the golf course. We've got 35 vendors, anyone from Jim Beam to Johnny Walker to Glenn Fiddick, Glenn Morangi. They're all going to be exhibiting. So we're trying to incorporate Hammond Hill into the brewery and the golf course and the restaurant to create sort of this resort feel. So these big events are things that we're going to try more in the future. So if anyone I'll put the website in the chat here.
Yeah, so the last bit that Brad just talked about, Whiskey Wonderland, is programming. So if you're going to run a glamping facility, we have Aaron went back to school and got his efficient license, so he can programming his weddings. Weddings are a big thing as part of this thing. So weddings, you can bring 30 people, 100 people, I don't know how many people they can come there, they can have their wedding, they can stay there. So if they want to have a few drinks, all they have to do is make sure they don't fall on their way to their cabin, right? They're not drinking and driving. So, and then Brad's talking about Whiskey Wonderland in the wintertime, right? Which you can have a little bit of whiskey and sample different whiskeys from all over the world. And I'm sure there's lots of fun stuff to do. And then you can, go and sleep it off in your yurt or your heated cabin. So programming is a really important part of what you're doing. Now, one more question before we let you guys go. We're almost out of time, but Brad and Aaron, you've talked about scaling this thing too. Are you going to franchise Hammond Hill?
I think the way we've always built our businesses is that we should always build them to either be able to resell or franchise. I mean, why not build in those systems and branding to allow for that? It's not to say that we will. Full disclosure, we have had a few different people approach us on franchising Hammond Hill already, even though it's only been about a year and a half of operation. So it's something Aaron and I are actively discussing. But there's a lot on the plate right now. So, but yeah, it's definitely an option.
We have to touch on small living company too, because I promised everybody that we do that. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Tell us about small living company.
So you all saw the pictures of the beautiful cabins that Aaron built. So almost immediately we started getting questions from all over about how can we buy these cabins to put on either our residential lot or an investment property, create our own little Airbnb. So as Aaron and I usually do, we formed a new company called Small Living Company. I'll put the link in there. We're not officially launched yet. We've already had our first sale, but we have a sales center at the Hammond Golf Course with 3 tiny homes that Aaron built inside in 2,000 square feet sales center. So it's kind of like the Minto model, but for tiny homes. We have all our displays. We have a sales rep. You come in, you buy your tiny home, you can finance it or buy it, pay for it in cash, and then we will manufacture it and deliver it and install it on site. So it kind of dovetails in really nicely to the Hammond Hill model, as well as some of our other businesses. I don't know, Aaron, if you want to add anything to that.
Well, we started the sales center actually again during COVID because we figured we could build in a contained environment. Bruce was the one that advised us to do it. It was originally designed to help sell memberships to the Hill. We were going to work on a membership model, and we realized there was more interest in actually being able to sell these tiny homes because they can be used as small offices. They don't have to be an Airbnb model. They can be a massage parlor. It can be anything it needs to be on different size platforms. And there's a huge market moving forward in the coach house, in tiny living. This is a really exciting part of our business plan right now.
And Bob, for you, the small living company, that kind of model is really something I like for rural estate lots and rural development, in the sense that there's another model here that we haven't really had time to touch on, and that is to take some of these small tiny homes or small living company homes or whatever, and put them on sites very similar to what Parkbridge does, where Parkbridge will have, the services there, and then they will land lease the site to you, and then you buy one of these small living company homes or Parkbridge homes or modular homes and put it on the site, and you own that home, right? But at the same time, for the developer, in this case you, Bob, or Aaron and Brad, they have the land lease income, which is really almost an infinite profit margin because their costs are so low, and it's committed monthly recurring revenues for everything, forever. And that's one of the things I wanted you to think about in terms of phase 3 maybe, or even phase 4, who knows what, at Madawaska Shores. It's a fabulous model. We don't really have time to go into it today. Our next class is September 29th. I'll send you the time and the link there, but it will be September 29th, starts at 11 as usual. And we'll have, I'm sure, another great class then. One thing I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of is, I'll just share my screen with you just for a second, is as we are going along, I am creating this course workbook. So the home run course workbook, you've already seen, sort of one edition of it, but it's a living document. It's getting longer as we go. So every time I send you an email with something in it that I think is worthwhile, or every time we do a lecture and it goes on YouTube, it's going in the workbook. So at the end of this course, all of you will get a copy of this workbook. It will be a complete history of everything we've done with all the links. I didn't give you the links that I wanted to give you in the chat box today, but I'll make sure I put that on YouTube and send it to you by email. So I want you all to say super great thanks to Brad and Aaron, who spent 2 hours with us. I learned a lot. I hope everybody else did. And thank you again, Brad and Aaron, for everything you did. Brad, did you put your email address in the chat box? Okay,
yeah,
so
I did. Thanks.
You know how to get a hold of Aaron. You know how to get a hold of Brad. These are fantastic, brilliant people and wonderful resources. They're paying it forward now, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Bruce. Nice to see everyone.
Great session today, Bruce. Really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
it.
guys.
Great stuff.
Thanks very much. That's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank you,
everybody
everyone.
for joining. See you later.